In Australia, school uniforms really started to become a thing in the 1920s. These first uniforms very closely reflected those of the school uniforms in England. The major difference that not a lot of school children in England can relate to is that school kids in Australia would sometimes walk and go to school barefoot. After the Second World War, however, the style of the Australian school uniforms became much more casual.
Sign language, or the non-speaking teaching method, is very expensive. Sign language is not only about the hand, but also the body and the expression. Because of its complexity, few people teach sign language. With the introduction of AL, all things will change. A ring of ripples is generated when a stone is thrown into water. Several rings of ripples are generated when several stones are thrown into water. But just one ring of ripples is generated when 10 stones are thrown into water within 1 second. It is about frequency.
The scientists told the teacher that they had selected a group of high IQ students. The teacher assumed that these students were chosen based on an IQ test. In reality, the students were selected at random. However, their performance turned out to be outstanding years later. Swiss engineer George de Mestral once returned from a hike with his dog and found many burrs clinging tightly to his trousers and the dog's fur. He noticed the burrs were covered with tiny hooks that could latch onto fabric loops and fur firmly. This natural mechanism inspired him to create Velcro, a fastener with hooks on one side and soft loops on the other. He named the invention Velcro, combining the French words velours, velvet and crochet, hook to reflect its structure. However, their performance turned out to be outstanding years later.
You need to give 4 weeks' notice before you intend to ask for a leave. Upon returning, you will be assigned to the previous position if you leave for 60 days or less than 60 days. If you leave for more than 60 days, you will be put in a comparable position. Employees should have same wage and benefits.
ID is required to open a bank account. You can deposit money into the new account. If you want to withdraw money, you can go to the ATM. Withdrawing money means to remove money from a bank account. To face growth of trade, it is deemed necessary to remedy this lack of adequate currency.
Poincare had an especially interesting view of scientific induction. Laws, he said, are not direct generalizations of experience. They aren't mere summaries of the points on the graph. Rather, the scientist declares the law to be some interpolated curve that is more or less smooth, and so will miss some of those points. Thus, a scientific theory is not directly falsifiable by the data of experience. Instead, the falsification process is more indirect.
So now that you've completed the research project, what do you do? I know you won't want to hear this, but your work is still far from done. In fact, this final stage, writing up your research, may be one of the most difficult. Developing a good, effective and concise report is an art form in itself. And in many research projects, you will need to write multiple reports that present the results at different levels of detail for different audiences. Over time, fashion and people's tastes change. Such changes affect the demand for products and services. Changes in work patterns tend to mean that fewer families sit down in the evening for a traditionally produced family meal, often because of lack of time. Consequently, people are now more likely to buy takeaway meals or convenience food, as opposed to ingredients for meals that take time to prepare. In contrast, people now tend to spend more time shopping and are therefore more likely to spend time relaxing in a coffee shop or restaurant while on a shopping trip.
Some psychologists believe that independent, peer-reviewed research in the decades since the MBTI was devised has provided something better than Myers-Briggs. They champion the notion of the Big Five, personality traits openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Of these, only one trait is closely shared with the MBTI, extroversion. Myers-Briggs does not focus on neuroticism, or, indeed, any similarly negative trait, which may point to one of the reasons why the criticisms lobbed at the test by modern science have yet to undermine its popularity. As Adam Grant says, going around telling people that they're neurotic and disagreeable will not win you any friends. The American mink has been present in Iceland since the 1930s, and despite heavy hunting since 1939, the species has become well established. The ecosystem in Iceland is simpler than in other areas where mink are found. the only other mammalian predator is the Arctic fox. Direct competition between these species appears to be minimal, although the Arctic fox will sometimes chase mink and disturb them while foraging. Iceland is therefore an ideal place to study undisturbed feeding behavior and ecology of mink.
Around 1 billion people depend on water resources originating from the Hindu Kush-Karakoram Himalayan region, attributable to both rainfall and melting of snow and ice. The wind in the valleys in the region plays an important role in transporting clouds and moisture and redistributing snow in the valleys, and so understanding what drives this wind is crucial. Around the world, wind in valleys generally travels up the valley and up the sides of mountains during the day. This is often driven by differences in pressure caused by the slopes of the mountains and the shape of the valleys.
The global market for electrical and electronic equipment continues to expand, while the lifespan of many products becomes shorter. The current global production of e-waste is estimated to be 25 million tons per year, with most e-waste being produced in Europe, the United States, and Australasia. In Europe, e-waste is increasing at 3 to 5% a year, almost 3 times faster than the total waste stream. Developing countries are also expected to triple their e-waste production over the next 5 years.
Your first draft is complete, but your paper is far from finished. The next step is to revise your paper, strengthen the content. Start this at least a week before your paper is due. In fact, you don't need to wait until you have a complete first draft to start revising. You can revise individual paragraphs as you finish them as well. Developing computational thinking helps students to better understand the world around them. Many of us happily drive a car without understanding what goes on under the bonnet. So, is it necessary for children to learn how to program computers? After all, some experts say coding is one of the human skills that will become obsolete as artificial intelligence grows. Nevertheless, governments believe coding is an essential skill. For many years, I had been thinking of writing a book. Not an ordinary book, but a literature book. I would do extensive literature reading and think about how I could do as well as they had done. What I did is what you will need to do.
We live in an age of unprecedented opportunity. With ambition, drive, and talent, you can rise to the top of your chosen profession regardless of where you started out. But with opportunity comes responsibility. Companies today aren't managing their knowledge workers' careers. Instead, you must be your own chief executive officer. That means it's up to you to carve out your place in the world and know when to change course. To gauge optimism and pessimism, the researchers set up an experiment involving 22 calves. Before they started the experiment, they trained the calves to understand which of their choices would lead to a reward. In the training, each calf entered a small pen and found a wall with 5 holes arranged in a horizontal line, 2.5 feet apart. The hole at one end contained milk from a bottle, while the hole at the opposite end contained only an empty bottle and delivered a puff of air in calves' faces. The calves learned quickly which side of the pen held the milk reward.
In 1997, Lisa McKeon, a physical scientist with the United States Geological Survey who works in the park, came across a pair of historic photographs depicting the glaciers she studies. Over the years, countless photos of the majestic park have been snapped, and many of those have become part of the park's official archive, spanning over a century. It was a light bulb moment. Why not use the old photos to create a timeline of the morphing glaciers and add new photos every year? The Repeat Photography Project was born.
Many students sit in a tutorial week after week without saying anything. Why is that? Maybe they do not know the purpose of a tutorial. They think it is like a small lecture where the tutor gives them information. Even if students do know what a tutorial is for, there can be other reasons why they keep quiet.
Fibers suitable for clothing have been made for the first time from the wheat protein gluten. The fibers are as strong and soft as wool and silk. However, they are 30 times cheaper. Narendra Reddy and Yiki Yang, who produced the fibers at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. He says that because they are biodegradable, they might be used in biomedical applications such as surgical sutures.
Most European countries are concerned about gender inequalities in education. However, the comprehensiveness of legislative and policy frameworks differs widely. On the one hand, they differ concerning the degree to which gender equality concepts are embedded in various legislative acts. On the other hand, they can frame gender equality in different ways, focusing on one or more of the various concepts that are associated with this term.
Mechanical engineering student Ni Tan is spending the first semester of this year studying at the University of California, Berkeley, as part of the Monash Abroad program. Ni Tan, an international student from Shanghai, China, began her Monash journey at Monash College in October 2006. There she completed a diploma that enabled her to enter Monash University as a second-year student. Now in her third year of study, the Monash Abroad program will see her complete 4 units of study in the US before returning to Australia in May 2009.
Humans appear to be the only species which is able to translate their communication into another medium, and in this case the medium provides a semi-durable record of the elements of the communication. So reading is a very special ability that we have. Reading also is special because, unlike language, most children have to be taught to read, write, and spell. So though we may be predisposed to being able to read and usually have the abilities necessary to master reading, it is something that most of us only accomplish through the direct help of others.
Cameras help autonomous vehicles read street signs and the color of traffic lights. But LiDAR, ACA light detection and ranging systems, do the important work of sensing and helping cars avoid obstacles, whether that's a fallen tree, drunk driver, or a child running out into the road. Now, a startup called Luminar Technologies Inc. is unveiling a high-resolution LiDAR sensor that was 5 years in the making. The startup, which has raised $36 million in seed-stage funding so far, built its LiDAR systems from scratch. University of Otago Center for International Health Co-Directors, Professor Philip Hill and Professor John Crump share a view that global health is a multidisciplinary activity. In their work, from Tanzania to the Gambia, from Myanmar to Indonesia and beyond, they tap into a wide range of expertise from across the university, including clinicians, microbiologists and molecular microbiologists, public health experts, economists, and mathematicians. They have also forged relationships and collaborations with research and aid agencies around the world. For the past 7 years, Professor Philip Hill has been part of a collaborative tuberculosis research project in Indonesia with the University of Pajajaran in Bandung, West Java, undertaking European Commission-funded research into the causative links between infectious and non-communicable diseases, which in this case are tuberculosis, TB, and diabetes mellitus.
Early in 1938, Mario de Andrade, the municipal secretary of culture here, dispatched a 4-member folklore research mission to the northeastern hinterlands of Brazil on a similar mission. His intention was to record as much music as possible as quickly as possible, before encroaching influences like radio and cinema began transforming the region's distinctive culture. Traveling by truck, horse, and donkey, they recorded whoever and whatever seemed to be interesting. Piano carriers, cowboys, beggars, voodoo priests, quarry workers, fishermen, dance troupes, and even children at play. But the Brazilian mission's collection ended up languishing in vaults here.
It was there that Rosa Parks, an African-American woman, refused to vacate her seat in the middle of the bus so that a white man could sit in her place. She was arrested for her civil disobedience. Parks' arrest, a coordinated tactic meant to spark a grassroots movement, succeeded in catalyzing the Montgomery bus boycott. Parks was chosen by King as the face for his campaign because of Parks' good standing with the community, her employment, and her marital status. In many ways, the Montgomery bus boycott kicked off a national struggle to eliminate national discrimination, with King leading the way and ultimately become the nation's racial equality movement. Historical records, coins, and other date-bearing objects can help, if they exist. But even prehistoric sites contain records written in nature's hand. The series of strata in an archaeological dig enables an excavator to date recovered objects relatively, if not absolutely. However, when archaeologists want to know the absolute date of a site, they can often go beyond simple stratigraphy. For example, tree rings, dendrochronology, literally tree time, dates wooden artifacts by matching their ring patterns to known records, which, in some areas of the world, span several thousand years. For as long as I can remember, there has been a map in the ticket hall of Piccadilly Circus tube station, supposedly showing night and day across the time zones of the world. This is somewhat surprising, given the London Underground's historic difficulty in grasping the concept of punctuality. But the map has always fascinated me, and still does, even though it now seems very primitive. This is because it chops the world up equally by longitude, without regard to the reality of either political divisions or the changing seasons.